today we've got a great topic, and that is removing the sand from the gearbox.
What gets in the way of us scaling our company? What are the cogs that get in our way? I was confused by removing the sand from your gearbox. What did you mean by that, actually?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it must be a Michaelism or something like that. In my companies, we have this saying, we need to remove the sand from the gearbox. What that actually means is that if you've ever heard sand or the gears grinding in your gearbox of your car, it's the most horrific sound. And the car just doesn't work properly. In fact, ultimately, the car can actually grind down to a halt. And so removing the sand from the gearbox is, how do you get your business to actually be flying down the road versus grinding the gears? Where you've got people just frustrated because things don't get done. You've got people getting like miserable. They don't like their job anymore because there's just sand in their gearbox. And how do you actually remove those barriers from scale to scale? How do you remove those things?
So
A
Michael,
classic,
we call it something different. We say a well-oiled machine. This company's
yeah.
running like a well-oiled machine,
Yeah, we
right?
have
So
that.
that's the opposite.
We have that too, but I think it's a case of it must be like I said, a Michaelism where I've got along. I create this saying in my companies where we need to find the sand in the gearbox. What are those barriers to scale? We need to find them, and it's a classic case of having a well-oiled machine is great, but why is it well-oiled versus one of my roles as the entrepreneur of the company is to hunt out the bits of sand which is grinding people's gears. And with the result, we have a team in one of my companies that we've been together for 14 years. The reason why is I'm constantly sitting down with them and saying, okay, so please explain to me what you're doing and how do we go along and remove the sand from your work schedule? How do we automate these things? Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're still doing that. Like, I remember I had a conversation with one of our team members, and he's the most incredible operations guy out, amazing guy. And I discovered he was doing the same process for a particular activity that he did like over a decade ago. And he just did it faithfully every single day. And you could say that's a well oiled machine. Or you could say, hang on a second, why don't we just automate that? Frees up your time to be able to do something else. And he said, well, that'd be great. I didn't think it would be possible. So we then had a little mini project of, okay, we're going to automate that task. That's just ridiculous. And what you quite often find, particularly with really good operations people, they'll be like that. They'll just continuously do things. And they'll be a well-oiled machine. What? Eventually they get to the point of too many tasks on their list and things like that. And they end up sitting down, having the conversation of, look, I'm really not happy in my job anymore. And as the entrepreneur, we've got to stop that. We've got to go ahead and stop that happening to our team and guard particularly the good people against those sort of activities, against doing that sort of thing. And that's why I find one of my jobs, for instance, is finding that sand in the gearbox, because quite often these people can't see it, or they didn't realize something was possible because they have skills in one area, and you suddenly, as the entrepreneur, bring skills which is across the business. And getting rid of those things is the number one priority I find for entrepreneurs. So if you're in the audience and you're sitting there saying, oh my gosh, I've got some stories to share about this. I've got team members that have been doing the same thing and I didn't even realize it. Or, yeah, I sit down with my team or something like that, then please stick your hand up. We want to have you on stage because it's not just the Colin, Michael, and Jeff show. It's and Michelle's show. It's all about you guys, you as the entrepreneurs, isn't it, Colin? It's all about them.
It is. And I was just thinking, what's the first piece of sand that gets into that business, the cog? And I was thinking office politics. And I know everybody here in the audience has experienced the office politics. You bring more than 3 or 4 people together, and the politics already starts. As entrepreneurs, we really don't care about the politics. We just want to get to the result. But then we're being hit with this person said that person said that. How do we handle that? That's a good question. Maybe the first question: how do you handle office politics? Because I think that's a big sand that cogs the wheels.
Hello.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I'm going to come back to you, Rogat, in a second here. Office politics is one of the things which will kill your business. Absolutely kill your business. And you need to be able to root out any sort of office politics. I'd like to say that in my company, we don't have it. We just do not have office politics. And we're very focused on the end result. And the reason why is because we're constantly on the lookout for it. But it's not just me, it's the other members of my co-founder as well. Like, we just don't give a stuff about office politics, as we would say in Australia. It's all about how do you move the company and the team forward. But it's removing those barriers to scale. If you're looking for venture capital, let me tell you, in many cases, venture capitals will knock out an investment for one of two reasons. Number one, there are significant barriers to scale. And it could be marketplace wise or just in the organization itself, barriers to scale. The second thing is quite often they knock something out because it requires selling to large corporates, with which case the sales cycle is like humongous. It just it blows right out. So if you're in a business, you're thinking, I want to raise capital, then ask yourself, what is the sand in your gearbox? It could be a relationship with suppliers. That is really slowing your business down. Or in one of my cases right now, we're looking at doing a completely different way of approaching customers. And what we found was we have a really good triage process for customers right now. What we want to do is not have a really great triage process. What we want to be able to do is automate that process, because the really good triage process right now is intensely manual and requires humans to review things. Wouldn't it be great if we could have computers review a new account application and automate that process out of sight? So now we can scale to thousands and thousands of customers in that business rather than hundreds. And that's an example of sand the gearbox. But anyway, I just want to hear, I'd love to hear from Rogat. It's great to have you on the stage of the Complete Entrepreneur. I noticed you got your powder popper there, so you're new to Clubhouse. It's fantastic to have you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what does it mean for you to remove sand from the gearbox. So welcome to the stage, Rogat.
Okay, thank you for your good presentation. For sure, it is building as youth, but also as a younger generation from Africa and specifically from Tanzania. Yeah, I'm Robert from Tanzania, a founder of a key platform, a volunteer of Red Cross, but also a human rights defender. Currently, I'm serving people with different disabilities, but in serving people with different disability, I'm looking for empowering them about in different skills to make different entrepreneurs to become an entrepreneur according to their respective area. So
Rogat,
we are facing some
what
yes.
can I just say? What a fantastic thing. You're working with the Red Cross and you're serving the disability community, and you're looking at those people becoming entrepreneurs. Would that be right?
I didn't get you. Can you pardon it?
Yeah, so it's what a tremendous thing to do. And I think that one of the challenges with doing something what you're talking about is because you're really talking about humans, and how do you scale humans, for instance, is a really big challenge. And it's all very well talking about computers and things like that, but how do you scale humans? Because you're going to be dealing with the individuals of how do you teach them? What can you do to go along and empower them to be entrepreneurs? Like Colin, just hearing what Rogat just said there, do you have any thoughts for him on what he could do? Like what an amazing thing he's doing in Tanzania and in Africa. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I do. And if we talk about politics or we talk about issues with the company scaling, normally, really, it's all about everybody's not on the same page. So the question is, how do we get everybody on the same page? And I think there's probably three areas. we might want to think about here. One is core values. Have you established core values, which are really the rules of the game here? Hire people, we need to fire that person. So it's really all. I'm having Wi-Fi problems again here. Are you able to hear me, Michael?
Yeah, you faded in and out just then.
I'm
If you can
switching
just go
Wi-Fi
back about two
networks.
sentences.
Yeah, I'm switching Wi-Fi
Yeah,
networks
just
here.
yeah, no worries. Just as Colin switches Wi-Fi networks, I'd love to hear from yourself, Michelle. Like, you're an
Over
incredible
600.
manager and entrepreneur in your own right into different businesses and identifying the sand, the gearbox. But Rogat highlighted something really interesting there with his business in Tanzania, which is how do you scale the human side of it? Is there ways of using technology to scale the human side, Michelle? Michelle? Okay.
Can you hear me
So
now, Michael?
looks like Michelle's gone. We're going to come back to Colin. Colin,
All right, so I'm hoping this stick works. I switched Wi-Fi networks here. Oh, jeez. Like I talked about earlier, it's about establishing core values so
Hello.
that everyone can play by the same rules and understand that these core values are set up, and each of us as employees or as an owner, we all can operate by those core values. That's the first key. I'm having Wi-Fi problems here, Michael. I'm sorry if just interrupt me if you don't hear me. But
yeah, no worries. It's working fine. It's working
okay,
fine.
second is we all want, if we're flying blind on an airplane, we ain't going to succeed. You got to have KPIs. And if we establish those KPIs for our company, key performance indicators, then we can track exactly how we're doing. The last thing I will say is goal setting. If we can set goals, and we all know that the annual goal for the company is this, and the quarterly goal for the company is that, and we're all targeting and focused on those goals, that can make a difference. So think about core values, KPIs, and goals. And by the way, maybe the app is doing something wrong today, but I'm getting bad internet, and I've switched multiple networks.
Yeah, not a problem. It looks like I'm hanging in there. That's for sure with it. But yeah, it's an interesting question. How do you find that sand, the gearbox? And one of the things that quite often happens, though, with human capital as such, is that interactions between the different people create sand in the gearbox. In other words, one team member doesn't really work well with another team member or something like that. I did an interesting exercise just recently. I'd like to share about. It was one of the things I sometimes do to be able to root out sand the gearbox and hopefully enlighten the different team members of the differences between one another. And it was this. And I would encourage you to do this. You're an entrepreneur in the audience. I would encourage you to do this. But just before I share the story, and we come to a man in a minute, if you're in the audience, you say, you know what? I really want to scale my business. I got some questions that I need to ask, like about scaling. What do I got to do to scale my business? Then please put up your hand because that's one of the most critical questions you can ask as an entrepreneur is how do I scale my business? How do I take it from where it is now to the next level? And what have I got to do? You got some people up here who have, I hate to say it, have been there, done that, and we understand a lot of things about scaling. So if you're in the audience, you're saying, "I want to scale my business," and you're not sticking your hand up, then you're going to ask yourself the question, "Yeah, do I really want to scale?" Because there's nothing like picking the brains of people who have done it rather than trying to reinvent the wheel yourself. So I just want to share the story then of one of my things about what I did with my team just recently. I did an exercise, and the exercise was this, and it didn't take very long to do. It was really simple. I shared with the team the fact that ancient cultures, many ancient cultures, they had totems that they represented each individual member. And as an example of this, you had the classic Dances with Wolves movie, where Kevin Costner's character was his name. His totem as such was Dances with Wolves, or he then had one of the other characters stands with a fish. Stand with a fist, sorry, not a fish, stand with a fist, and so forth. Yeah, and there was something that represented who they were. And I share with the team this. And I said, I'd like you to share who you think you're. What is your totem? How do you view yourself? And I got some really interesting feedback. We have this is just in a Zoom session. And the interesting feedback, I had like one team member who was a developer. He says, I'm a boulder. I'm a great big rock. And I just roll down the hill and I'd squish one bug at a time. But you know what? I just keep on going. And that you set the direction, and it's going to be very hard to move me. I admit that. You give me my work schedule, and I'm a boulder, and that's what I'm doing. And another one said, I'm an ox. And you know what? You can just load me up. You set me down once again in a direction in the field, and I'll just plow that field. Yeah. And another developer, another guy said, I'm an explorer. That's what I am. I'm an explorer. And what I love doing is getting messy in spreadsheets and trying to understand what's going on in them with the data and all that sort of stuff. And I love exploring all that sort of stuff. And then we had one of the sales guys say, I'm an eagle. I love swooping down, getting a client, dropping them in the nest back home, and then going out and getting another one. That's what I love doing. And what it did was it gave an insight into not just how each person viewed themselves, but also how they interacted one to another. So I went along and said, look, I'm like a pillar of fire. I blaze a way forward and hopefully shed light as I'm going away. But you go along and say something can't be done, and I'm going to go straight through it. And that's what I am. And I then related an interaction I had with with the boulder and the ox. And I said, can you see that in this interaction, it was a pillar of fire speaking to a boulder and an ox? And we began to understand our interaction, which was not necessarily a really positive interaction. Everyone's, that makes sense now. That's getting rid of sand out of your people gearbox, is actually shedding light. And as an entrepreneur, our role quite often, and Colin, you put your finger on office politics, our role quite often is to shed some light on the interaction so people have that aha moment. They go, that's why you reacted that way. You're the explorer. All you want to do is get messy in data. That's why you responded that, hey, this is my work schedule. I'm going on my work schedule, and this is what I'm doing. That's why you responded that way, because that's who you are. So how do we interact with
So,
those people?
Michael, do you know how
Yeah,
I deal with office politics in my office?
yeah,
It's
fire
probably
away,
not the
Colin.
right answer. I use the Prime Directive from Star Trek.
Could you use anything else?
Non-interference. Non-interference. I just don't get involved. I just walk away. It's probably totally the worst way to handle it. Maybe somebody in the audience who has dealt with politics can share with us what they do as well. That would be great. And it's an open session, team. Everybody in the audience, it's open here. We want to have open mic.
Yeah, it'd be great to have you guys up there. So if some of you are sitting in the audience think, oh my gosh, that's a great thing to do with your team, yeah? You can go along and find out how do they view themselves. And as a part of the session, I couched that in not only understanding yourself, but it's not the what we do at work. It's not even the how we do at work, doing it. Very few businesses ask their team members, why are you doing that? Why is the business doing what it's doing? And there's a great book by Simon Sinek, and I highly recommend you read it. It's called Start With Why, and there's a handbook that goes with it. But finding your why or starts with why is one of those two. Just look up Simon Sinek, Sinek, I think is his name. But it's a fabulous book of trying to find out why you do something. Why is your business doing what it is doing? And by the way, you say it's obvious, it's to make money. No, that's an outcome. The outcome is to make money. But why are you doing it? What is it that inspires you to get up each day? What is it that inspires your team to get up each day? It's so critical for a business. Like you look at businesses like Harley Davidson. And Harley Davidson, sure, they make motorcycles, but why do they do what they do? It's for freedom. It's for freedom of the road. You too can be a wild hog out there on the road. You too can go along and journey and be free. Just all you got to do is just buy this Harley Davidson. And you know what? we're going to back you. We're going to make sure that you're free. Yeah, it's a classic thing. It's like, why do you do it? And find that. And when you begin to drill down, and by the way, this is not an event, this is going to be a process, and may even take you as the entrepreneur, it may take you a year or so to try to determine what it is that you are doing and why are you doing it. Every business can tell you what they're doing. They can always tell you how they're doing it, but why are they doing it? That's a deeper question, and that's a challenging question. So I'm going to jump here to, oh, sorry, Jeff, fire away.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get back to the sand in the gearbox for a minute because I've been thinking a lot about what I would refer to as sand in the gearbox. And the thing that pops in my mind, Michael, is that sand is very small. A grain of sand is tiny. And sometimes a few grains of sand, they could be in the gearbox, but they're not going to be big enough for you to notice. So you still might think that engine is running and everything's happening smooth, but there's sand in there, and eventually it could cause a problem. And I think a lot of times for startups, the sand in the gearbox is also invisible. And you may not realize that you're going down the wrong path. And a lot of that, I think, oftentimes has to do with focusing on the right things. So you might have the team running smoothly and everything seems to be going great, but you're actually on the wrong path. And so that's the invisible sand in the sandbox there is that you've actually got the team focused on the wrong things and you're not actually focusing on the core things that are actually going to move your business forward and allow you to scale and achieve your goals. So that invisible sand to me is more common in many respects than the sand that causes things to break down so you clearly know you have a problem.
Yeah, look, Jeff, you were just so right in that. Is I think one of the roles of the entrepreneur, the founder of a business, is to try to find the invisible, the intangible, and remove it from the gearbox. And that's a really tough job. Like doing that is one of the toughest things you can do. And just getting those things out of there. The number one question I think that every business needs to ask is, what are my key metrics? You touched on that, Jeff. What are the key metrics that I need to look at and know in my gut every single day that I'm looking at this? I don't care if it's the weekend, whatever. I want to know what that key metric is. Is it billable hours? Is it hourly rate? Is it number of widgets sold? What is the key metric that you are monitoring day in, day out? So when it goes wrong, you can say, something's going wrong here in my business. You can drill into it and you can find that sand get rid of that sand out of the gearbox. But I think you touched on a really interesting thing there, Jeff. Look, I'd love to hear from Michelle. Hopefully your internet's working right. I know you've been trying to come in there, Michelle. I'd love to hear from your perspective on the topic of how do you find that sand? Over to you, Michelle. Looks like you still got some problems there, Michelle. We
I
can't
feel like
hear
the
you.
app is like going weird today
Yeah, it
Hello,
because
looks.
on my internet, I just did
I
a test. I'm 150 megs down. And here's where I got
Yeah,
Michelle, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. Looks like Michelle's got some problems. Yeah, she's flashing there saying, "Yeah, I've got some problems." So, if you're in the audience right now, you're listening to the Complete Entrepreneur, and we're taking a look at a really interesting topic. Is as an entrepreneur, how do we get the sand out of the gearbox? And as we've been phrasing this and discussing this so far in the first half of today, it's all about what do you need to do so that your business can truly scale? How do you get rid of those things out of the engine of your business which stops you from scaling? And how do you scale? If you're in the audience and you're sitting there going, my gosh, this is really important for me, and I know some of you are there, this must be important for you, this topic, because let me tell you, how many of you are saying, I need to raise capital or something like that, or I need to go along and really grow my business? If you're saying that to yourself, you need to be sticking your hand up and asking questions. And it is just so important to do. But so please raise your hand up. I'd love to hear from you. We'll invite you to the stage. It'd be great to hear from you there. But I want to come back just for a second to our great Tanzanian friend, Rogat. Rogat, you're there working with people. If you keep it really short and your questions, well, we wait for other people to stick their hand up and so forth like that. So we'd love to get them a chance at the stage. But Rogat, so what have you got to share on this?
Okay, I want to share something. It is like a question to you all members from different countries that how do you work with people with disabilities, like those who are not hearing or visually impaired? How can you teach him or a business to become a businessman or a woman in a given context like
I think
that?
that's a great question. How do you embrace the entrepreneurial spirit of people who may be disabled? Yeah. And because you know what? Disabled people have goals and ambitions just like all of us. And as entrepreneurs, they can not only be great entrepreneurs in their own, but though people with a disability can be fabulous employees as well. Colin, in your businesses, have you experienced like working with people with disabilities? And what has your experience been in all the different businesses you have? And what's your experience with that being?
Like when we built our office here, we went out of our way to make certain everything was handicap accessible. Everything. We have a shower in the office, we have the restrooms, we have the front door. Like everything has to be handicap accessible because let's be honest, 60% of what we all do is on the computer. And it doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair, it doesn't matter if you're deaf or you have other issues. You can get over those challenges and you can be very productive. And in fact, I think sometimes you can find people who are more productive because they're dedicated. Once you make a commitment to them, they're committed to you.
I completely agree with you. In fact, I would go as far as to say, Colin, that probably 90% of my work is in looking at a computer, and it would really make no difference to a person in that sort of profession, whether they're disabled in any sort of fashion. Sitting at a desk, there's not much to it. And I think that as entrepreneurs, we need to open our eyes up to an incredible group of people which just want, many of them just want a break. They want to be able to work. They want to be able to go along and have that opportunity to be able to express themselves in a job. Yeah, and I think it's fabulous what you've done with your own workplace there, Colin. It's great. But I want to jump across to Joe here. Joe, it's great to have you on the stage of the Complete Entrepreneur. We're talking about like how do we scale our business? How do we get that sand out of the gearbox? So welcome to the stage, Joe.
Thank you. The first thing that I'm trying to get the sand out of my business right now is I'm building my CRM from Dynamics 365. I know there's tons of CRM products already out there, but every time that you need a customer relationship system, it almost ends up being nuanced to your trade. And you need your own trade kind of embedded within it. So Microsoft is, I guess, they and Google are combating for your total amount of data for all your connections and contacts. Customizing a CRM preemptively in order to, before I'm deploying my minimum viable product. That's where I'm debugging the system. I'll take any advice if that's just go get traction on minimum viable product, or should I be spending as much time on debugging the sand and making sure that my quote process is easy, making sure that my sales process is easy, and having all the traction or KPIs that I can measure from a system. Because if I do it all manually in Word documents and Excel documents, then I'm not going to go through back. I'm not going to go backwards and find my KPIs. It's just not worth the labor to do that.
Yeah, Joe, look, I think you bring up a really interesting point. And what you're saying is that is it worth having a really big CRM like that and putting all the effort into it and that sort of thing? And it's a bit of a double-edged question in some ways. I can just share with you my experience, and there'll be two extremes of this. I remember back in the 90s, there was a CRM called Act. And so we got into my business and got the sales team working it. And in that process, I watched our sales drop. And I thought, scratched my head and said, what's going on here? what was occurring was that they were spending so much time filling out everything in the CRM that they weren't actually talking to customers. Yeah, like filling out all the fields and all that sort of stuff, and it was crazy. There's a huge amount of stuff going in there, and I said, "That's it. I want my sales team to be talking to customers. That's what I want." But I need to go along and have them sort of record stuff in a system. So I went and sat down with them and I said, okay, what is the bare minimum we need? We said, okay, we need to know like the suburb of the city they live, we need their phone number, the email address, and their name and their position. It was something like that. I said, okay. So that night I went home and I built an online system so they could actually use it. And they came back and said, oh my gosh, all we got to do is spend like, I don't know, 10 seconds filling this out. Then they said, like a few days later, said, look, what we need though is somewhere to keep notes. What do we need discussing with them and any meetings and that sort of stuff? I said, not a problem. So I went home that night and I went along built a bit more of the system, which made the notes. Yeah, and I kept everything absolutely minimum. And with the result, sales skyrocketed because they were talking to customers versus talking to a machine. Yeah. Now, flash forward to 2000, about 2010, and one of my businesses, which is in operation now, we went to Salesforce. Salesforce is like obviously a huge CRM, and we still use Salesforce this day, and it does amazing things for us. It really does, and it's fabulous. And we become like experts in Salesforce. And there's lots of fields to fill out. It does also tracking, reporting, you name it. Like that particular client had eggs and bacon for breakfast. It's almost like that. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's been really good for us to use Salesforce. So there's the two extremes. Quite often in a startup, what you're after is the bare minimum amount of information so you can get the maximum amount of information from clients. If you're still developing your minimum viable product, I would recommend that you don't have some massive CRM system, but you have something really cut down. It could be a blooming spreadsheet because you're after information from customers. Colin, what do you think
I
about
think
that?
that carries over in a lot of areas in IT because these IT installations can be very expensive, costly. And what I've done in the companies, rightly or wrongly, I mean, Jeff and Michelle know about this, is I say just do it manually, and if it's viable, we'll automate it later. And if we get the business starts coming in, then we start to automate those processes, those technologies. And yeah, the problem is when it does start to take off, you got to play catch up. But at least we
So
know it's something that we can do. What do you think, Joe?
So the position that I'm in right now is that I'm nested within another company. I get a great salary, and I can have commission on everything I sell. Great. I got strategic partnership, access to manufacturers, fantastic. So what I've found is that the salespeople at the existing station, they don't have a great way to make the quote for the technical equipment or make that quote in time. So I haven't hired my own salesperson because frankly, I don't want to lose that much time on it. So I'm not at an overhead yet, but the moment this tool's done, I feel like, all right, it's time to pay someone now because their time can be used very well. Now they can actually go make me money. Whereas if I didn't have the tool built, I'm like, now I'm paying for them and their time. And every time they have to remote dial up a cell phone, get their cell phone to be the mobile hub, then log into a computer in order to get access to CRMs, to the existing CRM system, it doesn't work. So I really want to just make it available on their phone.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and we can't fully answer for you, Joe, other than to say, like, I've been involved in technology for, oh gee, 40 odd years, and and I can just say I absolutely agree with Colin. Is keep it really simple at the beginning and do things manually because that'll teach you a couple of things, which is it'll teach you it'll teach you what is required in a process before you go along and leap into, say, some great big online system. And I'm not saying the decision's wrong or anything, stretch the imagination, but it teaches you what is the process for a client? Like, what do they have to go through and things like that? And there's nothing like a shared Excel file sitting in a Dropbox for a bunch of people. They can just manage everything from that for the first little while you're going along and generating a whole lot of sales and things like that from it. And then you can migrate that into a CRM. I'm a strong proponent of do it manually, then automate. And this is creating sand in your gearbox, but it gives you a greater understanding of what that piece of sand is. And Jeff said it before. He said, there's invisible sand. This is an example of you're actually building some invisible sand by doing things manually initially. But the thing that's incredibly valuable for a startup is actually getting understanding of what the market's reaction is to whatever your product and service, and whether it's technical or not, and all that sort of stuff. That is gold, and understanding that. I know that, Michelle, you've been having some hassles with your Wi-Fi and things like that. Are you able to flash your microphone? Because I'd love to be able to get your input on that. Okay, are you able to talk or not? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. All right then. If you're in the audience right now, you say, okay, I need to get some new ideas for scaling. How do I scale my business? Then this is the place to ask the questions. This is the place. It's not, oh my gosh, I can't ask this question. This is the place, you know what? You can ask whatever question you like, and we'll do our best to answer to help you out. But you got to do one thing first. And that thing you're going to do is stick your hand up. If you're wondering how do you stick your hand up, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a bunch of tools on the bottom of your Clubhouse app. And the one to the far right is the microphone. The one just next to that's your hand. So if you click on that, you can actually request to go along, come to the stage, and we can invite you to the stage. It's like Joe, and Joe's asked a really good question there. So what does that mean to remove the sand from the gearbox? And how do you identify the sand in the gearbox? I think this is an interesting question, and Jeff and Colin, you both touched on it in different ways, identifying sand in your gearbox. And one of the things I look at is what are the key metrics of my business, and are they fluctuating? Like how they're going down, particularly, or what's going up, and what's causing that to happen, and keeping an eye on those key metrics. So, coming to yourself, Jeff, I know you do an enormous amount as a marketing guru around identifying key metrics. Are these things that you set up and you look at on a daily basis to take a look at those key metrics, and then you say, there's something going wrong there? Is that something you keep a focus on?
There's certainly KPIs we track on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. And obviously, you're looking for things falling off a cliff or anomalies so that you're looking for leading indicators of problems in the business in different ways. Sometimes it's hard to pick KPIs that truly are leading indicators. It's a lot easier to choose things to measure that are trailing indicators, meaning it's telling you what happened, but it's already happened, so there's not much you can do to fix it going forward. So you want to try to find leading indicators, things that if you see big discrepancies are going to raise a red flag that there's something here that's going wrong or something that needs to be fixed. So that's really hard to really determine what are true leading indicators when you're determining KPIs.
About your KPIs, are most of your KPIs used to say this is where I'm preventing myself from hemorrhaging money? Or are most of them saying this is the key performance indicator to say I needed to grow at this rate? Flip a coin at which fraction go in each bucket?
They're all valuable. One of the key metrics, and sand, instead of sand in the gear, you need money in the bank for a startup. One of the key things is to really be fully aware of your cash, your burn rate, and how much runway you have with that cash. And that's, especially for a young startup, that's of critical importance, because you might have all the best plans and the best team in the world, but if you run out of money, you're not going to get from point A to point B. That's certainly a metric that's really
I think it's
important.
fair. I think it's fair to say we don't often focus on that metric, though, that side of the business. We are always saying, okay, number of leads will generate into sales. So we always tend to think of KPIs as growth. But I'm just now making me reflect upon this and think about, are there KPIs about, there is the average revenue per employee. There are some things like that. but I think that's not really a leading indicator. But that deserves some more thought. I think you're onto something there.
I think
So
it's
in
the
the
early days too, because when in the early days of a startup, especially if you might be pre-revenue or pre-meaningful revenue, then that cash flow and that burn rate and that runway number becomes critically important.
So in the chemical
Yeah,
engineering process, they have something called the failure mode error analysis. And I've heard often that there's a business failure mode error analysis, but I've never heard of anyone that's completed a business failure mode error analysis. And really, if they're done well, that business error mode analysis should be the repository of every KPI that you should be measuring in your company. It should come from that, hey, did you see how it could break? Or when this isn't doing it properly, this is why we have to measure it. So it's like the requirements for the business to monitor is in the business failure mode error analysis.
yeah. I think you bring up a really interesting question, and I think in many businesses they describe it differently. They'll describe it as what is the KPIs or something like that, or they try to zero in on what's the key metric. Because quite often, if you're trying to monitor like 20, 30, 40 different metrics, it's really difficult. And the thing I found is that there's normally 2 to 3 key metrics for every single business. And they're the ones you've got to keep an eye on. I know with my own businesses, I've got 2 to 3 metrics maximum for each one of those businesses. And it could be like not just number of sales, it could be the value of sales. Okay, so the value of sales is going down. Why is that? Because our product mix is actually inadvertently, we actually made it cheaper. We have cheaper products we're selling. Therefore, the value per sale has gone down, or the value per sale is going up, and that's great. So you begin to focus in on a number of key metrics. Quite often, you've got people look at the sales funnel and they say like how many leads and how they convert and all that sort of stuff, and it comes out the bottom. Or should you just take a look at the bottom and just say, okay, the outcome. What is the outcome? Is that really the key metric? I don't care how many leads we have and all that sort of stuff, as long as the outcome is going in the right direction. And so you've got to synthesize everything down, because otherwise you get information overload. There's one thing I found in this day and age is there's no shortage of information. There's a shortage of qualified, good, intuitive, and revealing information. And there's not enough of that. But trying to find those KPIs for every business can be a challenge, because it's often not what you think it could be. Like Joe, it could be that the number one thing you should be looking at in a chemical related business is the orders of sulfuric acid, the forward orders. So as Jeff talked about before, is that you want to become predictive with your metrics, not just looking at historical ones. Therefore, predictive would be like the volume of sulfuric acid that you're ordering from a particular supplier. Could be that. And
Yeah, you
why?
want to
Because
measure
it's
your
forward looking.
derivatives of your process. What can be changing
Yeah,
with your process?
yeah, but quite often you'll find there'll be a key ingredient. If that key ingredient is going down, and you don't care what all these different boffins and engineers and all that sort of stuff are saying, you can put your finger as an entrepreneur on that one key ingredient, say to them, I hear what you're saying, but why is our key ingredient orders going down? And everyone will look at you and go, how did he actually come to grips with it so fast? Oh, we've had a big problem, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's it's the key ingredient. Yeah.
To me, the most important is the cost of acquisition per customer and lifetime value of a customer, because everything else is an equation beyond that. If you could acquire customers for X and your lifetime value is X, then it's simply a matter, if of course, sometimes in a scenario, or if you have a product where you sell on a repeatable basis, your cost of acquisition could exceed the initial payment. So then in that case, you need to simply get funding to accelerate your business. But I think those are the two key metrics that generally are KPIs that you want to really watch out for in companies.
The great
Yeah,
part is if you're doing your cost of acquisition for a customer, then that means that all of your margins, all the other math that's around that calculation before you can even get there.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's lots of things around there. Sometimes it is cost of acquisition of customer, Colin, as you're saying, but other times it's cost of the value of the customer. Because you can maybe get lots of customers, but they're all doing stuff or revenue, and what you need
Yeah,
is
and I'll also.
valuable customers. Yeah, so it's the cost of the value of those customers, what they're bringing in. But Edna, you've been sitting there really patiently, and it's great to have you on the stage once again of the Complete Entrepreneur. Edna, I'd love to get your thoughts on this topic. Welcome to the stage, Edna. Edna, you there? Oh, okay. She's not there at the moment. This
I
action
tell you,
item
this
for
app
when we get
today is
back.
really wonky. But I got poor connection. Try to find a stronger signal. I've changed to 3 different Wi-Fi's. In any case, if you can hear me, it's still on right now. But if you can
Yes,
hear
we
me, I
can hear
think
you.
also that when you do your KPIs, it's important that you track them very consistently and on a regular basis. So, for instance, at paw.com, we track our ROAS. What are our costs, basically cost of acquisition per new customer? How much do we spend on that per day? So we're tracking these KPIs on a daily basis because that's how sensitive the advertising market is. We want to understand whether or not we're making a profit on a single day. And so I want you to think about that with your business too. It might not be just KPIs that you track once a month or once a week. It might even be daily or hourly, depending on your business. In our case at paw.com, it's daily.
I agree with you there, Colin. Like getting a number you track daily, and I said this to a new sales guy who joined us. I said every day, without fail, I don't care if I'm on vacation, I don't care what it is. There's a particular number I'm looking at. There's a particular report I look at every single day, and there's not a day goes by without me looking at that report. And he goes, why is that? I said, because it's not just the numbers, is what I'm doing is I'm feeding my intuition. And as an entrepreneur, with all of the different information and data and all that sort of stuff you're getting, it's your intuition which will give you insights into your business like nothing else. And I said, there's one particular report it synthesizes so many numbers that I can actually encompass in my own thinking and synthesize it down where I know exactly what's going on with all of our partners that we have. I know exactly what's going on with our revenue line. I know exactly what's going on right across the business. And by feeding it every single day, I'm getting a sense of trends. I'm getting a sense of what's going on with it. And so when something goes wrong, and I must admit, some of the members of my team, they've been on the receiving end of this, I'll just say to them, what happened today? And they said, what do you mean? I said, I saw these numbers, particular numbers. And they go, how did you pick up on that so fast? And it could have been just a blip, not a great big sort of drop or anything, just a blip. And I said, the reason why is because I look at it every single day. And I can pick up on these things. And I would highly recommend that you actually do that, is have a key report. Like Rupert Murdoch, the head of News Limited, massive organization, he has his whole business summarized onto one piece of paper that's put on his desk every single day. He's got a number of key metrics he looks at, and every single day he gets that one piece of paper because he wants to understand what's happening with News Limited. Like, how can you possibly know what the headlines are on some newspaper on the other side of the world? But he gets that one piece of paper. And that's a key thing I think you're raising there, Colin. But Edna, are you around still, or you're still off the?
Yeah,
You're there.
I'm
Great,
here. Hey,
Edna.
Michael. I stepped away for a minute. How are you? How are you guys doing? Good to see y'all, as
Good to
always.
see you. I'd love your thoughts on this topic, Edna.
That what you don't measure, you can't grow. So you've got to definitely keep your finger on the pulse. And I'm curious to know what kind of report you're looking at on a daily basis that allows you to see things so clearly. Because usually companies, and the larger the company, the more this is apparent. By the time someone in upper management realizes that their sales have fallen off, it's maybe 30 to 45 days later because they're not looking at those reports. And so I always tell people sales is the driving force of any business. If you are not making that cash register ring, you can't grow. So you have to constantly, that has been you have to constantly keep track of where you are, and that's where you should spend a majority of your assets developing talent and teaching them how to close and grow the business. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Colin.
the gears broke down on one of the businesses, and I won't mention the name, Meow, about a year and a half ago, when the individual who owned the company prior to Michelle and I owning the company started doing advertising on Facebook and was spending an 80% ad spend. And within 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of December in 2019 or 2020, I can't remember which one it was, had spent almost $300,000, yet there was no daily tracking. And if there was daily tracking, it would have been very clear in the first day, second day, third day that something's gone off the rails here. And so we had a gearbox that ground to a halt. And we've had to reboot the business and everything since they're doing well now. But I just look at that experience and think about, had we had a daily metric, had we been aware of what was going on, we wouldn't have allowed that mistake to occur.
Yeah, that's a great example, Colin. Yeah, it's of sand in the gearbox, and where it gets to the point where the gears just don't move anymore, and you have to quite often recapitalize the business, which is never a pleasant thing. To go to the shareholders and say, "Hey, we need to go along raise a whole lot of capital." Never a good thing. One of the great things I love about the internet is that 99% of things are measurable. Exactly how many people have clicked on a particular ad. If you don't know, you should know. You know exactly how many people have come to your website from that particular marketing channel. How many people went along and filled their shopping cart from that particular marketing channel. You know exactly how many people then went along and finally purchased those products. And you break the whole sort of sales cycle down. And you should be able to see every single stage of that sales cycle. The KPI could be the thing that comes out the bottom. Like I said, it could be like dollars per sale. Is it trending up, trending down, or is it numbers of sales, or whatever it is? And what that'll do, it'll force you then to look back at your entire sales cycle and then identify where something's gone wrong. Maybe you were buying traffic from a place and suddenly it got more expensive, or suddenly they turned the faucet off, or yeah, there could be lots of reasons, but you can just backtrack it very quickly then what the problem is. But it's all about getting the sand out of the gearbox. And if you're not doing that as an entrepreneur, and we touched on it very lightly about the interactions between team members, could be sand in the gearbox, could be invisible sand, it could be we're deliberately creating some sand in a manual process before we automate it so we can understand what that process it is. It could be a whole lot of things. What is the key metrics you need to be looking at? What are the piece of sand you need to be aware of? It could be that a particular business you're in, you're going to be creating the same sort of sand over and over again. You got to clear it out. Got to clear it out. You got to clear it out. Whatever it is, you've got to have the engine of your business running smoothly. And as you were saying a second ago, Edna, uh, that quite often the executives high up, they don't have the right reports, they don't have the right metrics, they don't have the right information for them to help make decisions, or maybe like a month or 2 months later. I think it's crazy in this day and age. You should be able to get access to the right information every single day. And if you don't have that every single day, then you need to reevaluate on what information you're really looking at. But wow, what a great conversation we've had today. Looking at removing sand from the gearbox, or what are your barriers to scale? That's what it is. And I think this conversation could keep on going, but sadly, we've run out of time. I just want to jump back to yourself, Colin. What's going on with Startup Club? Because let me tell you, the people in the audience here really need to hear some amazing things, what's going on there.
Just two really good shows that happened in the last week or two. We had Bhavan Turkai, who started multiple unicorns. You can go to startup.club and you can listen to his show right there online. But if you want to be aware of when we get a new billionaire, or yesterday we had the founder of Reebok on, he had some really cool things to say as well. If you really want to be in touch and you want to know who's coming out, all you have to do is just enter your email address in. If you enter your email address in, we'll tell you exactly who's coming on when we have a big speaker. This guy created a multi-billion-dollar company, he and his brother. And both of them actually, you could say Bhavin Turkai, he did that, and also Joe Foster from Reebok did that. And they're available in recordings at startup.club. Second is tomorrow, open mic, our number one show on Startup Club, the Serial Entrepreneur Club Hour happens at 2 o'clock Eastern. And we're doing open mic, why startups fail. What a concept. Talk about failure. Maybe we can learn from that.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that it's much better to go along, learn from someone else than to reinvent the wheel. And it's great having something like Startup Club there. I know I put my email address in and I subscribe and I get the messages, even down here in Australia. And sometimes, quite often actually, I get up at 3 or 4 in the morning or something like that so I can go along and listen to those shows. And you had another one, what was it? Jeffrey Moore, he did the book Crossing the Chasm. After
Yeah, no, we
hearing
keep
him,
getting authors. We've had
it's
him.
pretty
We've had
fantastic.
the customer-funded startup author. We've got a number of other authors that we're in talks with right now to bring them on. This is all free stuff. If you go and you listen to all of our shows on Startup Club, you'll have an MBA in entrepreneurship. But I love your show, Michael. It's all about the human. It's not. It's about the entrepreneur himself or herself. It's not just about the business.
Yeah, it's one of the challenging things is being an entrepreneur is that we have emotions, we have high days, we have low days, and that's what we try to take a look at also in the complete entrepreneur. But it's been great having you here today, everyone. Next week, let me tell you, next week is we're talking about interesting topics. It was like this segue from what you just said, Colin, which is who are you and what makes you tick? Who are you and what makes you tick? Understanding who you are is a key to becoming a successful entrepreneur. It's not what or the how that's transformative, but as I said even earlier on, it's the why. You do what you do that gets you out of bed each day. Yeah, so what is it that makes you really tick? What gets you out of bed? And that's something we're going to be unpacking, taking a look at, and digging into. And it's fabulous to have my co-moderators on the stage with me again. It's great having each and every one of you, Colin, Jeff, and Michelle. And love to hear from Michelle next week. Hopefully her Wi-Fi will get fixed. It's been really good. Missed you all last week because you were at a conference, but so it's good to have you back. But also for those of you on the stage, Joe and Edna, it's fabulous, and the others were on the stage here as well earlier. It's fabulous. Thank you very much. Because one of the things I love about this show is hearing from people in the audience, and that's what's so critical. But lastly, but just as importantly, for all of you in the audience, you're the reason why we do this. Yeah, you may think, oh my gosh, these guys are making great big money. I haven't earned a penny from this, and I do it because I love entrepreneurs. That's the reason why I do it. And I love seeing someone come on fire as they talk about their business or they talk about some idea they have they're about to do. Like hearing from you, Joe, a few minutes ago, it was just great. It's what I live for. And I love hearing people's passion. And I've yet to find an entrepreneur that isn't passionate. So thank you very much for attending the show. We'll be back here at 5 p.m. Eastern Time next week. It's going to be great. It'll be 7 a.m. my time here in Melbourne, Australia, but there's nothing like being here for the complete entrepreneur. Look forward to seeing you then. God bless and have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And if you haven't already done so, make sure that you click on the little greenhouse up at the top and follow the club. You'll get notifications for upcoming events as they're having them. And you can also go to www.startup.club and get more information there as well. As always, Colin, great room. Thanks,
Yeah,
Michelle. Thanks,
great.
Jeffrey.
I love working with you, Edna. Every time you come on stage, you always have such great wisdom. And hopefully we'll see you in more sessions and I can join some of yours as well. I'm getting back into it more regularly now, so hopefully I'll have more time for
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah,
We're actually running a series here on Startup Club starting, I believe, April 15th on renewable energy
Oh,
startups.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
that's
I think we're doing that on
exciting.
the Serial Entrepreneur Club Hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe that. Yeah, yeah. That's we've got somebody from England coming on as
Yeah.
well. Love it. All right, we'll talk later.
Yeah,
Bye.
good stuff, Edna. Thanks very much. And by the way, if you're in the audience too, I should have said, if you see someone on the stage, you think, gee, they got some really interesting perspective on this, click on their profile. You can always follow them. Go ahead and do that. And I think it's fabulous to go and follow other like-minded individuals that you can learn to respect and reach out to them and have a good conversation. You never know what may happen. A great amount of business may result from that conversation. Thanks a lot for that. Bye.